is it controlled by controlling the voltage applied to the mixture, or both, that results in the selectivity?
The selectivity comes from the membrane selection, because there's electrodialysis where they just use regular membrane, and then you have a lot more constituents passing through. In this case, the selectivity is because of the selection of the membrane.
Eugene, but you did mention that they add a little bit of acid on the concentrate side to prevent scaling. So there's got to be something else other than the nitrate passing through to create a scaling problem. Wouldn't that be a fair statement?
That would be a fair statement.
Okay, thank you.
If you look back at the cartoon, it's more than nitrate that passes through.
Any more questions? Oh, there's one. Any on the web? Nope.
Januszowicz, CDPH. I know they're not here, but can we email them or something to provide a cost estimate or to compare to the other technologies?
We're going to do that, aren't we?
I think that's one of the projects that we probably will work on after this, is to determine to actually revisit with all the vendors to make sure we get cost information that is as close as possible, so that we can indeed compare apples with apples, or at least closer than what we have seen so far. So everything, all the costs that we've seen so far, we haven't had a chance to really scrutinize them. So we'll spend more time in working with the vendors to get some costs that we can compare.
So just so all of you know, we at the Water Board have been meeting with CDPH over the last few months, preparing for this workshop, and so that we could do comparisons, so that you could get a flavor of how these things stack up against each other. We did pose certain parameters. We did give them the framework for how they should give us those costs. We plan on following up, so check that drink website and come up with some sort of a table, and I understand some folks have offered to help us do that. So we will follow up and try and get more information if it's lacking, and make sure that you understand the parameters we posed, and could have some better ideas of those costs, because we do understand that cost is a factor. Before I go to the next presenter, I do want to acknowledge the teams. From the Water Board, we have Christopher Stevens, Jim Mon, Wenelin Foy at the back there. And CDPH, we worked with Mark Bartson, Eugene Lung, John Paul Blanco, and LaFay Wong, who's at the back somewhere, that will collect your evaluation forms. So once again, we're going to put back up, because there's a delay on the web, but the presentations can be found at drinc.ca.gov/DNN, and the video will be there as well. And we have one last presentation.
Yeah, he stood up.
He did stand chat. And then after that, we've got some closing comments from Fran Spivey-Weber. Thank you.
I'll be quick, I promise. So this was actually the only thing I was really supposed to come and talk about, which was more of the perspective of how do all these treatment technologies come together and provide a picture of where are we today and what technical advances might be made to improve upon what we commonly use for nitrate treatment today, and how might those advances apply to small water systems that are in need of something that isn't currently available. And so these are just my thoughts and pull in information from what we've talked about before. But I really just wanted to use this family tree yet again to describe what are some of the ways that water utilities could consider addressing their nitrate treatment options. And I think Cindy did a great job this morning preaching the gospel message, so to speak, of how might these small impacted communities best address this. And the best way to address it is by getting rid of it entirely and using other sources that are available. And so sometimes that means regionalization is the issue. That doesn't necessarily mean that they completely abandon those sources. And so I wanted to just speak to the fact that there are a number of communities not so much on the smaller side, but some in the small-ish side, serving fewer than 10,000 persons in their communities, where they've taken their nitrate-impacted wells and wells that have other contaminants of concern above current MCL conditions, and they've invested in putting those into use in other ways, non-potable irrigation purposes, other industrial uses. This is not uncommon at all in the Salinas Valley, where there's nitrate contaminated water supplies used for irrigation or for other industrial processing. And the more we can look at the overall picture of how water is used and minimize where we actually have to treat water for potable purposes, the better off we can be. Now, moving ahead to the nitrate removal technologies, certainly appreciated hearing everybody's updates today in terms of what can be done for ion exchange and the improvements on those things. You know, some of the technologies you heard about today have the opportunity to really make a dramatic step function change in the ways that we deal with nitrate treatment via strong base anion exchange, for example. If we can get rid of brine disposal altogether, or to the point at which it's, you know, one tanker truck a year instead of one tanker truck a day, that makes that treatment technology something that might be viable. We take away the infeasible aspects of the current process, replace it with some other challenges of, you know, technical and managerial capacity, but it certainly is decreasing some of the aspects of the challenges that are existing today. Was glad to hear about some of the other aspects of improvements on the electrodialysis side. Certainly the SED approach provides something that's not in the marketplace today and is being demonstrated elsewhere. While it's not a completely perfectly nitrate concentrate system, there is high TDS in that from a direct discharge perspective. In Israel, those systems are operating with discharge to irrigation water supplies and being used for that beneficial purpose. So it's worth considering. Is there ways to consider using that here if those systems might be installed in locations where that could be a benefit? Now, I wanted to just add a little bit more to the nitrate reduction category. When Eugene asked me to try to give a synopsis of all of the different treatment technologies and what else is out there, and I'm going to be quick, really the only technologies that we haven't talked about much at all really lie in this area of chemical denitrification. And Charles Drury did a good job of describing some of the academic research that Calgon is collaborating with the University of Illinois for their catalytic chemical denitrification approach. But there are others that are worth mentioning too. While still on this overview slide, I'll mention the zero-valent iron and sulfur-modified iron type approaches that have been demonstrated. I was directly involved in that research for several years, which demonstrated that it is appropriate and possible to reduce nitrate to other things other than nitrate, although it's not often capable of reducing nitrate all the way to nitrogen gas. Often you end up at an incomplete reduction at ammonia, which causes other challenges and concerns, particularly for small systems. So I would not want to advocate right now that those approaches are appropriate for small systems. That said, there may be additional advances in terms of some academic research that could push those things forward. But obviously, it would be ideal if we can search for that quote-unquote holy grail of nitrate treatment that has limited chemical deliveries and waste disposal, and that's where I think the research is certainly heading. So let me point to a couple of them. One is yet another Israeli company that's working on another catalytic reduction technology. Same fundamental chemistry as what Charles was describing, and I should have borrowed Eugene's disclaimer slide. These slides are not mine. They are not it's not my intention to endorse this, but simply to just inform the community about what else is going on as an example. But they also are using a palladium copper catalytical approach to reduce nitrate. Now, this reaction happens in the presence of hydrogen. And so moving ahead, that hydrogen and that catalyst is developed and deployed in an activated carbon cloth. These types of technologies are being used in other marketplaces outside of drinking water, other industrial treatment processes. And so people are just trying to find ways to adapt those technologies in ways that can find some sort of meaningful application in potable drinking water. So they put the catalyst of palladium copper into this carbon cloth, for example. They roll it up and they put it into something that looks very similar to a pressure vessel for a reverse osmosis unit. In fact, they've adapted the technology to use exactly the same pressure vessels as an RO unit would use to make them modular and easier to deploy, since obviously lots of effort has been invested in adapting those technologies for drinking water treatment. Now, these systems are not operated under pressure, though. They simply apply hydrogen at the head of the system and allow it to go through the reactor chamber, and treated water comes out the back end. I wanted to show you this picture as an example of their current pilot system, treating a water with nitrate concentration in the raw water of about twice the current U.S. standard. So they've got a pre-reactor and they're feeding hydrogen, and then they've got a main reactor, and they're dealing with the hydrogen saturation question right now. This is a small 1 to 2 liter per minute system. They're going to a 1 cubic meter per minute system soon, which is obviously much, much bigger. The way that I look at these types of technology advances is everything that's done at bench scale, like shown as this experiment, is all fine and good. If you can show that that works and actually achieves the treatment objective, and you can show that the cost of that technology is somewhat in the ballpark of being cost competitive with what's being used today, then it's worthwhile moving ahead to pilot demonstration. And so that's where they're at right now. And so, like the catalytical approach that Charles described a couple of talks ago, I do think that this has the opportunity to provide a technology that just is not in the market today, and therefore provide some other advantages. Another option on the chemical denitrification approach, which really there's no direct vendor pushing this today, it's more academic research, is photocatalytic reduction. So this is using titanium dioxide in the presence of UV light, and some of our good friends at the university, or Arizona State University, and there's other researchers doing this work too, but I would point folks to this particular reference in the Journal of Environmental Engineering as one of the most recent references on this subject. Nitrate can also be reduced by this means. Similar to what was presented before by Charles, they've looked at both direct treatment of water for potable application as well as reducing nitrate in ion exchange brine streams. So a common theme here of how can we best apply these technology approaches for primary treatment. If that can be really simple and be deployed at a scale that's relevant for small systems that are the primary market drivers for the technologies today, then great, let's move those things ahead and try to get them to market. Otherwise, if they provide a meaningful opportunity to decrease the operational costs associated with the current primary technologies, namely strong base anion exchange, then they provide an opportunity there too. So with that, that's the family tree, and I think that's the end. Well done, folks, for hanging in there.
No kidding. Thank you. Any questions? There is one. You're not going to get off yet.
Matthew Keeling, Central Coast Water Board. What about non-biologically mediated enzymatic reduction? Has anybody looked at that using like nitrate reductase and some way to try to?
I have seen that in literature on very, very small scale. I've not seen that more broadly applied in an engineered system that would be a continuous flow system. Certainly the biological chemistry is there to support that, but not. This is the engineer speaking who's not a biologist, who would say that I don't know how you make that leap to a more quote-unquote full-scale system. But I hope more people think about that and come up with some options. All right.
Thank you. I got a question on the web, a general question regarding biological processes. You're off the hook. Does an approved biological process such as Envirogen or Aeronite need to undertake a demonstration study and or challenge testing for every proposed installation?
Eugene Long with Department of Public Health. For biological treatment processes, right now we have very, very limited experience. So for the conditional acceptance that we provide them is just demonstrate that their control system, the scheme, has worked to treat some water. At other sites, they need to approach the local district offices and then let them know what source they need to treat, and we'll work with them to demonstrate the scope of the pilot testing that they need to do.
Thank you. At this point in our agenda, we had time for responses to audience questions and technical discussion. Over the last 2 days, we've all heard a lot about nitrates. I know more than I did before I got here. We've had information linked to that family tree on various treatment technologies, biological and other. We've heard from disadvantaged communities about some of the challenges that are out there. We need to make whatever we do manageable and affordable. So those are some of our challenges, and I think that's a segue to what Fran might need to say. If you have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand. There's one at the back. Let's take that, and then we'll go to you, Fran.
Issam Najim, this is a question really for the board and DPH. I mean, we talked a lot about technologies. But the elephant in the room is the fact that these systems do not have the underlying infrastructure and resources to run any of these technologies. How do we come to terms with that? And we apply the same model for a 1 million person agency and a 2 connection agency from a regulatory perspective. Can we continue to do that and expect these small systems to be actually able to operate under that model?
Thought-provoking.
The answer is obviously no. I mean, I think, but you can't let people who have 2 connections drink bad water. So that's our dilemma. That's why we were here today. That's what we're trying to come up with some ideas. I want to make Carl, of course, please.
That's a good question, and that's a question that the Governor's Drinking Water group is looking at right now. There will be some recommendations coming out of that group to address that very question. There's, part of that question is, do we have the structures out there for consolidation and so forth? And that group is looking at the whole myriad of factors which play into that. Good question.
Absolutely, and I think we can get there, and I think we can get there faster by having meetings like this where we bring people from different perspectives, from the business perspective as well as from the local organizing perspective as well as the state agencies. I just have a couple of thoughts, and mostly I'm going to focus on funding and what the future is for funding. But before I get started, I wanted to mention that as we have talked through the last 2 days, a lot of these issues are agricultural issues. There's been a major focus on agricultural issues. I come from Los Angeles in Southern California, and I can guarantee you there are small communities housed within very large communities that are independent, that are they are not organized as towns or cities, and they have bad water as well. They may be not quite so tiny, some of them, but some of them really are. So it is an urban issue and it is an ag issue, both. And so we will have to deal with it both ways. Also, we're thinking short term and long term. And I mentioned when I first talked with you at the beginning of this 2-day session, we'll be looking for solutions. We'll be looking for interim solutions. We'll be looking for pilots. We'll be looking for more research. I heard that in spades during the last 2 days, that all of those are going to be options. And then there'll be some things that we just don't know yet, which will be coming online as well. So this is not something that we're going to solve and then be able to turn to the next issue. This is something that's going to be ongoing. And so the better we plan and the better we coordinate among ourselves, I think, the better we'll be able to match the technologies to the problem and match the cost of running those technologies to the problem, to those who are able to who need the help to deal with their water situation. We'll be looking at at funding in particular for infrastructure and technology, as well as O&M. I think you cannot put in a system without looking at the O&M at the same time, and maybe even looking at it ahead of time as you start to choose what the technology is that you're going to be getting into. Among the things that I heard in the last 2 days of sources of funding, I thought it was terribly creative of the Environmental Justice Group in Munson to be working with the Rotary Club for raising money to do some local work, and then getting a lot of in-kind volunteers to do the plumbing and that sort of thing. Now, clearly that's not going to be a statewide solution, but it is it's kind of a pilot of a sort. And we shouldn't overlook the power of local communities to do some self-help of their own. And so I think we want to make sure that we enable that kind of activity as best we can. And there is local funding as well. There are local, every local area, whether it be a county, a city, an agricultural district, a groundwater agency, all of these groups have budgets. All of these groups budget for serving their constituencies, many of whom are in the target communities of this particular workshop. And so I think we need to be thinking about working closely with other agencies, other entities that have some funding. They would never be able to carry the whole load. They shouldn't be expected to carry the whole load, but maybe they can carry a piece of the load. There are regional coordination advantages to dealing with drinking water while we're also dealing with other issues. And I'm familiar particularly with the Integrated Regional Water Management program that has funding from past bonds. There may be another bond. There may be some more funding in that. I know that the EJ groups are working on the bond language to get some money into it for disadvantaged communities. And so, but I suspect that money will be tied to being part of a regional coordinating effort, so that it's not just isolated with just one group here or one group there. It'll be very hard to pick and choose, and so you'll want to try to get people to work together. So regionalization, I suspect, is going to be another extremely important theme. But Carl mentioned the governor's drinking water program. There certainly is legislation that is a possibility. There's certainly planning for what we as state agencies do, Department of Public Health, the State Water Resources Control Board. I would add to that group the California Public Utilities Commission. I would add to that group the municipal water agencies that are somewhat separate from these efforts as well. We need to engage all of them at the state level to come up with some solutions, and particularly funding solutions that can be shared regionally and locally. And we've heard a lot from the academic community, and many of the ideas that were put forward here came out of the academic community. More are on the drawing board in the academic community. We need to be working with foundations that are interested in investing in some of the academic work. Certainly the federal government also puts money into some of these activities. And as we're looking further ahead, this is not going to solve today's problem, but looking further ahead, a lot of the wastewater treatment plants and the drinking water facilities that were built in the 1970s because of the passage of the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, those facilities are reaching the end of their lifespan. Now, I don't expect the federal government to do what they did in the 1970s, to come in and essentially pay for 90% of what was set up. But I do expect that there will be some money coming in. We need to be prepared for that money, and we need to be thinking ahead about what is it that we want. Do we want a replacement system for what we have, or do we want to be planning for the future so that we're actually treating water to a higher quality for household use versus water for a higher quality for lawn use or for outdoor use. And so there's a lot of planning and strategizing that needs to go on, and it needs to go on at a lot of different levels. And it won't be the state board, it won't be DPH alone who are going to make this happen. The regional boards, I include those in with the state board. It will be all of us. And so I think those of you who have been the guinea pigs to sit through 2 days of this effort, you are now on our database. We will be tapping into your talent, and we will be needing every single solitary one of you and more, because whatever we do, if it's going to be a campaign, particularly a campaign that is transformative for the state of California, it cannot come from one sector. It has to come from multiple sectors. It has to be good for business, it has to be good for health, it has to take into account climate change. It has to bring in other players who may not be interested just in drinking water, but can contribute to drinking water because it reduces greenhouse gases. I mean, or it does something else, but it also improves water quality and drinking water quality. So this has been a fabulous, thank you, thank all of you for organizing this. This has really, really been fabulous, and I particularly appreciate what all of you have done in your presentations and also in your attendance. Oh, it's Mark here. He is, he's back. I didn't see him. There he is. That's right. Here's my partner in crime.
Thank you, Fran. So I don't want to keep you all. I know that, and I just got back in. I'm sorry for that. You guys got done in the nick of time as far as I'm concerned. I wanted to say a few things and then talk a little about some of our funding programs that have been alluded to in the course of the conference. First of all, I've only been able to sit in for about maybe a third of the workshop, but what I saw was really impressive, and what I've heard from my staff and others about the various presentations, there's a huge amount of work in this area, of course, and the technology that's out there is remarkable, and both in terms of the types of technology, but also the scale, that's possible with some of the newer technologies, and everything from point of use, residential applications, all the way up to the larger water systems. So that's really been educational, I think, for everyone who's participated in this, and eye-opening for me to some degree of what really is possible. But you've also heard that the technology is not the only challenge, and most of these problems are in the smaller communities, largely those that are 100 service connections or less, and that's really a challenge for us in our program as well, as far as the resources to operate those systems, especially with newer treatment technologies, the skill set, and of course the funding to be able to have those types of things sustainable. I liked how, I don't think Omar Carrillo's still here, but I like how he framed the need in these communities as investment opportunities. And that really is true, that this isn't just a welfare situation. There's opportunities to really advance these communities with some of the funding that we have available, but also some of the things that I think that Fran was just alluding to, that there's a much bigger picture here. So you heard from our Southern California manager, Cindy Forbes, that we have various funding programs, and we also have challenges that often the best way to meet those is through consolidation, and that's really our number one push for these smaller communities, is to find a way to consolidate them with larger water systems when it's possible. Of course, that's not always possible, but And to that end, we have, I think Cindy mentioned, just new this year, a funding incentive for larger systems to consolidate with small systems and basically advance the larger systems up on our priority list if they're willing to take on some of the challenges of a smaller system that is ranked higher on our list. Also new this year is our pre-planning and legal entity formation grant, and that will help the systems that have some of the challenges that Cindy described with, as well as Omar and Jeanette, with whether it's ownership, water rights, the necessary governance structure to be able to apply for our funds and to be able to do a feasibility study and construct and operate a system that's with new treatment technology. So that that's the pre-planning legal entity formation funding program, it's called. And then those applications just came out, I think in early August, and are due November 8th. And then just a quick reminder that we also have our regular old planning and construction grants and loans. Those applications I think are due September or December, I can't remember for those, but they're coming up. And if you go to our website, we have funding opportunities, funding programs there on our drinking water program website. And it's sometimes hard to find, but if you just Google the CDPH drinking water program, you'll go right to something that has funding opportunities and other things on the web page. So with that, I think I'll stop there and just really congratulate everybody and thank everybody that participated and presented in really a remarkable conference. And hopefully we can solve some of these problems together as we go forward.
Thank you. I think you had a question. Did you want to pose your question?
Well, I'm Bill Schwartz from Envirogens. It's really a follow-up with Sam's question or comment in there. From our perspective, from an operations perspective, one of the ways that we can really minimize cost is to do things where, for instance, hauling waste, for instance, milk run it, where you can take full loads of waste, deliver full loads of salt. And I think when you're looking at this, I think instead of a top-down type solution, you should look at a bottom-up solution. These folks are smart and they can figure out how to do things probably more efficient than you can regulate them from the top end. And I'll give an example, Lake Marina. When we were down there, we were speaking with the general manager down there, and she had already thought about this. How could she get full loads into a remote site to get full loads of salt and full loads of waste out of there to minimize her cost associated with it? So she was already working with her local groups, you know, people that had small systems throughout that area. So I think when you're looking at the planning side of this, again, from an operations perspective, I think if you can incentivize and try to get the people that are on the ground doing this to think through this thing and maybe band together to help themselves and say, listen, we will help you through tax breaks or whatever if you're willing to do something very generic, where you're not really implementing or impacting them to say, you must combine with this group. Let's just take baby steps. Let's start getting salt in at a cheaper cost. Let's handle waste in a bulk and get it out of there. Lowers operating costs, and I think it would get more of that pulling together of what you're trying to accomplish. So it might be something you want to think about and consider here.
Thank you. Any last closing questions, thoughts, comments, anything on the web? I think everyone's exhausted, but our brains are full of new information and ideas. So hopefully this is just the beginning of a dialogue, and we'll take it further and see what we can come up with. So as I said before, please check the website for all the presentations and this audio-video dialogue as well. And thank you very much for your attention these last 2 days. Please hand in the evaluation forms. Thank you.